growing up in a large family, I don't know, what's something that you found to be super cool about having so many siblings, and maybe something that you can think about that wasn't so cool?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a mixed bag for sure. There's a lot of both. Growing up, I think the part that I enjoyed the most was how we all spent so much time together, and we were super creative and super weird kids, and we did all kinds of activities that we needed each other for. Like, we were a large enough group that we could do all kinds of bizarre things with the circus side of stuff and the acro side of things and the destroying our backyard and like all the things that we did. You know, it was possible because they're of sheer number. We were just a lot. We were big.
People loved to, when we told them that we were at a family of 12, everyone's response was like, "Oh, you guys could have your own football team."
Yeah, except none of us cared about any of that. We wanted to create a acro yoga performance or something else.
It is
crazy.
still bizarre to me. I remember back, I kind of forget sometimes that we did this whole family circus show thing and like actually went places and performed it. And,
we
like
did,
we're in
like
the paper
for over a year. Yeah, we were in the paper multiple times.
Yeah, I completely forget that happened. Like, I remember, my obsession with circus, and I always, think of myself as a circus performer, and I'm still doing it. But I just forget that everybody kind of was involved at one point. Like,
we really were. And everybody's skills kind of developed at a different pace, and we all kind of had a different niche. But yeah, we were all super, super weird.
What did you do like in? I'm trying to remember like the show that we used to do.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember you being up on one of the balls.
Yeah,
that was
Joelle and I, or maybe it was Lydia and I. We would pass juggling. We'd do juggling balls, passing on the walking globes.
Yeah. Did you ever learn how to juggle clubs?
I did, yeah.
And you could ride a unicycle as well.
Yeah. Do you remember when we did the unicycle Romeo and Juliet play? Everyone was on a unicycle at
in Union or not Union Station. Newtown.
Yes, Newtown.
Yeah. You did that too?
I was in that, yeah.
I didn't remember who all was involved in that.
You and I for sure, but I can't remember if there was anybody else. But we did like practice every week.
Yeah, it was where like Richard Kennison was.
Yes,
Yeah, my old juggling coach and manager.
I mean, who thinks of this stuff? Like a Romeo and Juliet play for a community, but everyone's on unicycles.
Yeah. Well, it made sense because I remember it was like two feuding circuses as opposed to like two feuding families. And like it was the tightrope in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's how Romeo and Juliet were, sneaking out to meet each other. Yeah. I don't remember if that show was any good, but I do remember. I do remember it being a fun time.
Yes.
And yeah, I remember. Do you remember Mysteria Spalezi? So she was there, and her brother Zeke, and I can't remember her other brother's name. Yeah.
I think circling back, that is like the things that we got to experience and the things that we got to do because we lived in a very unique way. Mm-hmm. Because we were a large family, because we were homeschooled, because mom and dad were interested in investing in all of our strange interests.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite part. And all of my favorite memories kind of circle around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being kind of like homeschooled, at least the us older ones, we didn't really get to go do sports and things like that. But we did some other weird stuff that was pretty unique.
And a lot of it we did together. So that was kind of a necessary component with as many of us as there were. Couldn't have like one of us interested in one thing and all 11 of the others interested in other things. It just practically wasn't going to work.
Right.
So we kind of all jumped on board with certain interests, and circus was one of them for a while.
Yeah.
Acro.
Yeah.
And all that.
You did gymnastics too.
I did.
You were in gymnastics. I remember you and Joelle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we did gymnastics. I remember probably my most vivid gymnastics memory is Joelle and I spending months of classes working really hard to get to where we could do back handsprings. And we came home
I'm
and
sorry.
yeah, you're just such a jerk. And we told you about it. And you were just like, well, I can do that. And so you just did. And we all felt really dumb.
Don't feel dumb. I was just a little springy lad. I do remember that though, because I remember begging mom if I could get the couch cushions off to use as crash pads,
right.
so that I could do a back handspring. And I do remember. I mean, she's told the story many times. Maybe that's all I'm actually remembering is her telling the story. I actually don't remember the event at all, but apparently I just was able to do one.
I think for a long time the couch cushions lived on the living room floor.
Yes.
For
Yes.
whatever purposes we had for them. I was also the base for acro stuff because the sisters, Joelle and all the others, were all smaller, and so I was learned how to be a good base.
Yeah.
Throwing people a lot.
All right. What was something that wasn't so cool that maybe it was more of a struggle growing up in a family of 12?
There's definitely some components of struggle there. I mean, it's definitely not easy to be a kid growing up in a massive family.
Yeah.
It's
also a little bit hard because we don't also have anything to necessarily compare it to,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the amount of relationships that were involved was a pretty heavy component. And I'm a very relational person, and investing in people has always been important to me, even as a kid. And so I was very impacted by the constant relationships with my siblings, the positive ones, the negative ones, with mom and dad, and even as a kid trying to kind of balance the positive negatives of all of that. I think that was probably the hardest part, and honestly still is, I feel like, with as many of us as there are and how much I care about relationship. I think that's the hardest part is letting people be where they are and letting the relationships be what they are. I had a lot of really wonderful relationships with siblings growing up, but I also had really difficult ones that we had as kids just fought constantly. And I'm also a peacemaker, so I definitely learned some bad habits around sacrificing my own voice in order to keep the peace. And that's something I'm learning to give up at this point in life. But one I learned definitely as a child in a large group setting.
So you sacrifice your own voice to keep the peace. So what does that mean exactly? Like I think I know what you mean. Like, and I'm kind of the same way. Like I'm happy to be the one that doesn't have a stronger opinion in order for you to feel more comfortable sharing your stronger opinion. Is that kind of what you mean?
Definitely. I think as a kid that looked like whoever shared their needs the loudest in that large of a group were the ones who got their needs met. And that's kind of just how the world works, though. Like, that's how it is, now within my family and outside of it.
Yeah.
It's,
and I don't think that's necessarily a large family trait. I think even families of two, there's usually one that's louder than the other, and the other one feels a little bit overshadowed. For sure. If you will.
With 12 of us, though, there were just an enormous amount of personalities, and we all brought something different. And I think we all kind of took turns having a loud voice. But, there are some of us who just came out with a loud voice and have been loud ever since.
Was it challenging did you feel like it was challenging to get your desired individual attention in such a family where there was only so much attention to go around, like especially from parents or whatever? Maybe it's something that you wanted to go do or whatever, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I do think that in a setting of that many children, having your one-on-one desires as a kid met by your parents is kind of impossible. But as a parent myself now of only 3 children, which is a pretty average, normal-sized family, I think it's a challenge no matter how many kids you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think all three of my kids would say that they are not getting everything that they want from me, and on any given day. So, although yes, I would say that that was probably amplified with the size of our family, I think it's just kind of goes hand in hand with life and growing up.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, probably when I was younger, I felt like maybe more resentful about
Mm-hmm.
not getting more like one-on-one time kind of a thing. Not like, and what I desire now is just more like, I wish I had more of a relationship with, especially dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like mom and I have done a pretty good job of keeping up with each other, but dad and I are probably so similar in a lot of our characteristic traits that is our downfall for our relationship, because neither of us want to impose upon the other one to go out and have to do anything. And I know our quality time with dad growing up was, or at least mine was, doing housework and work around that. And I definitely resented him for that. And I remember he always used to say this line that just made me angry, which was, I'm trying to help you do this job, which I didn't want help with because it wasn't my job in the first place to have to do. This is your job that I'm helping you do. I hated when he said that. But
My almost 9-year-old just told me the other day that the list of expectations I had for her for that day meant I surely had no responsibilities left, and that it must feel like I am on a vacation from my responsibilities.
oh, the naivety.
So, right. And I think I remember having that thought. But yes, dad's quality time with all of us was family work days.
Yeah, yeah.
And those were miserable.
Yeah.
Probably like once a week or once every other week. That was pretty common. And he thought it was quality time we were all
Yeah.
spending together.
That we would cherish forever.
Right. He's also like a super efficiency focused person. And so we're going to spend quality time together, but we're also going to get things done. And that mindset we all hated, because we didn't want to be multitasking. Like we wanted to just be doing something completely recreational with him.
Well, I remember we always wanted him to just sit down and watch a movie with us.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And it was so special of a time when he actually was able to sit down and watch a movie, because the man just couldn't relax. He couldn't sit down for that long and sit through a movie and relax, because something needed to be done.
Still a struggle for him.
Looking back, what impact do you think growing up in a large family had on you, and perhaps still impacts you today? That's maybe a harder one to think about, but
Yeah. So, like most things in life, I think the challenges, like the challenge that I shared earlier of the relational aspect, although I think that was like the biggest challenge for me, I think it probably was the most impactful in a positive way that prepared me for life. And I'm really pretty darn good at relationships now, and I've gotten a lot of practice. And
relationships with your siblings?
Relationships with my siblings, and just relationships in general. Like through the process of growing up as one of 12, I think I learned a lot about people, a lot about personalities, a lot about tendencies, a lot about weaknesses and strengths, and a lot about communication styles, and obviously how to like get along and find compromise. And although that's still challenging, all relationships require it. And compared to some people that I know that didn't have an opportunity to grow up like I did, I think they've had less practice.
Yeah.
So I'll take that as a win.
Yeah, I think we all turned out relatively good with social aspects of life. And I imagine a lot of that has to do with how much social, like, there wasn't any alone time growing up. You had to socialize with people, pretty much all the time. And yeah, I can count on my hand the amount of times I remember being like home alone. Or
Right. Yeah.
like, and I spent time alone out, in the small little bit of woods we had, playing make believe and things like that. But yeah, we were constantly with other people. Yeah. that maybe is one of the biggest differences, I think, between having like a smaller family where eventually, like, yeah, you probably get a lot more alone time
Right.
to, yeah.
Which, I love alone time.
Yeah, of
And,
course.
at this point in my
I
life, I'd love
especially
more of it.
cherish it now. Yeah.
Right. But we definitely did not have that. And a result of that, I think was, twofold. I'm sure there were multiple aspects to it, but I see a lot of positives
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Um, do you feel like there was a strong sense of kind of unity between all the siblings?
I do. Absolutely. I think of us as a posse more than anything
Mm-hmm.
else. And we really did. I mean, we would be so mean to each other if we, were on our own. But when something came against us as a family unit back then, we really banded together and we were like unstoppable. We
Yeah.
could do anything.
Yeah.
And all of our ridiculously wild, dangerous ideas in the backyard, like, required all of us to contribute
Yeah.
to keep everyone alive. I mean,
We were always building some sort of contraption in the
we
backyard.
were. I was telling Ethan the other day about how we put the trampoline between 3 trees and put bungee cords with straps and belts, and we would just catapult each other up into the trees.
Mhm.
Like, what in the heck? That is so dangerous.
I think back and I don't even remember, or I don't think of it as like being a weird thing.
Yeah.
But like kids don't do that.
No.
And they certainly like. I mean, trampolines now. Like I always tell people, like the fences that they put around like trampolines, like the safety nets or whatever. Like I would have impaled myself on one of those because I was going so much higher than like you were supposed to or had any right to be on a trampoline. Yeah, I remember we put the trampoline between like 2 trees and we'd jump from one tree, hit the trampoline, and jump into the other tree.
Right.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody last night about like how much of a heart attack we must have given dad every time we looked out the window. And now you have kids, you can probably relate
Right.
more if you looked out the window and saw Arwen about to jump off of a tree
Right.
onto the trampoline.
I think it's funny though, because growing up, I remember thinking mom and dad are just so busy with the babies, because there was always babies and toddlers, that they just couldn't supervise all of us to the extent that a normal size family could have. But now, as a parent, I'm realizing that a lot of what they did was pretty intentional. They wanted us to take risks and they wanted us to learn things through that process.
Yeah.
They valued a different type of childhood that was uncommon and definitely had more risk factor. And don't get me wrong, there were definitely moments where they were like, wow, my kid should not have done that.
Yeah.
Like when you jumped off the barn with a tarp tied to your wrists and ankles.
I did that so many times before they even realized that I was doing that, though. I was telling somebody about that the other day too, and just remembering back how stupid that was.
It was not bright.
It wasn't bright, but I mean, it worked.
Right.
It worked.
And that's the thing. You learned through that process quite a bit.
For anybody that doesn't know, what I used to do was we had this barn that was, I don't know how high it was, but I would say probably like 20 feet, something like that. Which is pretty high, honestly. And I had this big tent tarp that I found, and I would tie 2 ends to my ankles, and I would hang on to the other 2, and I would run and jump off the roof. And the trick with it was you had to run to get it full of air before you actually leaped. Otherwise, like it wasn't going to have time to fill like a regular parachute in the air because the fall wasn't long enough. Not only that, but there was also this concrete slab I remember on the edge of the shop. So I had to be able to go fast enough to clear that as well.
To land on the soft grass.
On soft grass, yeah. Incredibly dumb. I did it probably 30 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I find myself having a very similar parenting mindset and value system around that, though, with my own kids. That is definitely not normal. I don't find it in a lot of other friends that are raising their kids these days. And Ethan was definitely not raised that way either. So I value my kids taking risks and learning through the experience. And I think that whether it was intentional or not, we had that pretty cool aspect of our childhood where we took a lot of risks and we did it together as a group, which did create that unity that I think was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And we learned a lot, and we didn't honestly have that many crazy injuries.
No, nothing like substantial. I don't even. I'm like the bones that I've broken have been very small, and they've been later in life. Like
Yeah.
when I was younger, doing the craziest things.
Mm-hmm.
I had very minimal
Yeah.
injuries, other than lighting myself on fire
Oh,
and
that was a good one.
a couple of other instances like that. Um,
Uh,
and
Circus life
most of the
risk.
injuries that people like to talk about me is ones I inflicted accidentally on others.
Yeah, there were a
From
few of
yeah,
those.
it is what it is.
I mean, the whole pulling Gloria up into the tree with
I
the
know.
old pulley,
Yeah,
that was
it was
rough.
maybe a mistake. Well, it would have worked fine if the pulley wasn't ancient
Right, right.
and about 10 pounds. Yeah, it was okay.
She couldn't have weighed that much though at that
I
age.
know.
Like
Well,
she
it was
was.
bad rope too. I think the rope came with the pulley, which is also ancient. So there was a couple of design flaws.
Yeah,
We'll say,
just
with the
minimal.
um. So I remember growing up, you tended to be the one that was left in charge a lot. When mom and dad did have to leave the house, you were the one, the authority figure from a relatively young age, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because Joelle was a little bit off doing her own things. She was going to some schools and things like
Right.
that, I remember. So you were tended to be the one that was kind of left in charge. Did you like that, or did you think that was a hard position to be put in?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I would say that at the time, I very much liked it. I have a personality that tends towards wanting people to trust me with responsibility.
Mhm.
And so I felt like it was a great honor to be considered responsible enough to handle the household. In fact, I was also very arrogant and thought I could handle the household significantly better than mom and dad. So I remember multiple times like changing all of the expectations of you younger than me and creating a bit of a boot camp style approach to I was just supposed to keep you guys alive, but I went above and beyond in
Yeah.
quite a few areas. Um, and I'm still that way now. And I do value everything that I learned through that process. But I have also discovered that that kind of falls into the category of bad habits that I learned of like people pleasing. And it wasn't necessarily the healthiest thing for me to feel responsible for my younger siblings in such a large way. And I have realized that those are expectations that I put on myself through that process. My parents never intended for me to feel responsible for the upbringing of my younger siblings. I kind of put that on myself. However, being babysitter a lot was expected of me, and it had its negative downfalls on some of my mindsets, but overall I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, looking back at it in hindsight, you feel like it was a thing that benefited you, in your life. Kind of, I don't know, taking on that much responsibility at that age kind of forces you to kind of grow up and I don't know, at least have a maturity that's beyond
Yeah.
your.
I mean, I always say that our family managed to raise really street smart kids, and I think that that responsibility was expected of us, and maturity was expected of us at an age that maybe our peers would not have had to have those expectations put on them.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, if everything can be. I believe that a lot of things can be a positive or a negative depending on your mindset and what you want to get out of it. And things that are difficult and challenging, it was difficult and challenging to be in a large family and to grow up that way with a lot of responsibility. I'll give you that for sure. I think it was looking at my friends who didn't have that responsibility. I do remember being jealous of that. Like what? Like your parents make dinner every night and your parents never leave you in charge of your younger siblings and I'm not even getting paid for this, like kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't get allowance.
No.
I remember being so jealous of kids that got allowance.
Oh, same.
Ugh.
I just remember Dad saying things like, thank you for participating in our family unit.
Yeah, when I found out allowance was a thing, like I felt so entitled to
Right.
be paid something for
Yeah.
being here.
Yeah. So it's interesting though, because now here I am, in my 30s raising 3 children. And my biggest challenge as a parent is trying to figure out how to not raise entitled, spoiled children. And there were a lot of aspects of my childhood that happened almost as just like a result of the reality that we lived in, that created values and results that I wish I could impart in my own parenting now.
Yeah.
It's difficult to have the means, like, because we grew up super poor. Like mom and dad didn't have the money to pay us all allowance or to do different things with us.
I couldn't even get 2 McChickens when I went to McDonald's. So. Only 1 McChicken.
I remember Grandpa, his greatest gift to you was to take you to a fast food restaurant and feed you until you just could not stop.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah, that was not a reality for us. But now growing up that way and now having kids of my own and enough financial means to really provide for them a very blessed life, I don't want that to result in them being entitled or spoiled. And it's a difficult balance.
Yeah. I remember kind of going back to the authority thing and you kind of being the one responsible for being in charge when I remember hating that. Because I looked at you as more of my equal.
Oh, yeah. We were peers.
And that was not I wasn't interested in any part of your boot camp.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And,
my boot camp was awesome.
I don't know. Do you remember like our dynamic at all? Like it's hard to remember, and it's just like little snippets. But I mostly remember, like I was pretty defiant to you because you did come off as militant to me, and I was not interested in your military. And I would just leave because I was independent enough to go off and do my own thing. I didn't need anybody telling me what to do.
I do remember feeling like I couldn't control you, which pissed me off. I don't remember you being particularly defiant, but that's kind of...
Well, I'm not a vocal defiant type
you
of
just
person.
disappear.
I just disappear. I wouldn't argue with you, I guess, but I just wouldn't do whatever you wanted me to do.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember Mom talking about that too with you, that you would never argue. You would just never do what you were asked.
Yeah.
And so... it was so bizarre.
It gave me the illusion of not being as stubborn as I actually was, but I was actually super stubborn growing up about what I would do and what I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But normally you relate that to how much back talk you get. So if you just get rid of the back talk and then just don't do what you were asked to do, you get a lot more time before
there's
any
less
repercussions happen because they just suspected that you did what you were supposed to go do. And I didn't. I was just gone forever. But I do remember being not interested in anything that you had authority-wise.
Yeah, that's not super surprising. I remember Lydia was very vocally defiant, and so her and I clashed quite frequently. I remember at one point there was a season where if I was left at home in charge, she had to go stay with Grandma because her and I would just battle the whole time.
Yeah, see, I don't remember that. Probably because I was gone.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
I wasn't there for any of those conversations.
Thanks for the support.
So we were part of the group of our family that was homeschooled, and some of the younger ones, eventually went to public school. So how do you feel like homeschooling affected you? And did you ever wish, especially when you were younger, that you got to go to a public school? Were you ever jealous of any of your other like friends that went to public school or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember honestly having friends back then that went to public school.
Yeah, I know.
Like there just wasn't a lot of that
No.
in
We would
the groups that we kind of ran with. And caveat, the groups were not great,
yeah.
but I don't remember having a lot of peers that made me feel abnormal in that area. When I did get a little older and met some people through different activities that went to public school, I remember thinking they were very strange. So I'm sure that they equally thought I was very strange. But I don't remember ever being jealous or wanting to go to public school. I really liked the freedom that it gave me, even as a child.
hmm
Uh, and so, yeah, I mean, I always tell people like my homeschooling experience was different than what I am currently doing with my kids, but it was also, uh, I mean, I remember doing school in a tree most often.
Right.
Yeah. And so when I tell my peers that now, like they think I'm just absolutely crazy.
Right.
Like, who does that?
Right.
And what felt very normal to me then as an adult, now I definitely see how strange our childhood was.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of wonderful aspects of the strangeness, but yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I remember being in a tree a lot, not doing my homework, which was probably my
Rule
biggest
follower
problem.
versus not a rule
Yeah,
follower.
yeah. I was defiant against it. I think I don't remember being jealous of any of my friends that went to public school. And I don't think I would have enjoyed public school either. I don't think I would have learned well in
hmm
public school. I didn't there's aspects of my upbringing and education that I wish I could go back and change.
Sure.
Primarily me just doing the work that I was supposed to do and not I was I cheated a lot like in
hmm
school because there was the possibility to do so.
Right.
And whether mom knew I was cheating or not, like I was just kind of I was able to figure out a way
Sure.
and probably put more brain power and thought and processing into figuring out how to cheat
Uh-huh.
my way through things than it would have taken just to learn the things I was supposed to learn.
Do you think that's actually served you well in your life, though?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, to some degree, like I'm a very literal problem solver.
Right.
I'm decent at like taking tests and things like that
Uh-huh.
because most test formats these days are like multiple choice. And if I'm given multiple choices, then I'm pretty good at like narrowing down like
Right.
what, I'm a very good educated guesser, I guess. But in other aspects of life, yeah, the problem solving goes past like taking tests and things like that. I'm not only pretty good at problem solving, I almost enjoy problem solving.
Exactly.
If it's phrased differently, like I hated math growing up, right? But math is really it is problem solving if
Right.
you can kind of like put it in the right light.
Oh,
And
100%.
I love puzzles and anything where I have to use logical thinking to
Right.
solve something.
Yeah, I mean, I see this setup that you have down here. All of this was quite a puzzle, I'm sure, like to
Yes.
put it all together.
Yes.
But because you were motivated
hmm
to do it and because it was very logical
hmm
problem solving, that,
I almost enjoy more setting up elaborate camera and microphone scenarios than I do actually making content.
Yeah,
I
right.
really enjoy like setting up the best streaming environment ever with all the lights
Exactly.
and things like that. I love it. I love it.
Which is kind of the same way, like you're just very efficient.
Yeah.
Cheating growing up was just your way of learning efficiency.
It was another kind of street smart. That,
Right. Yeah, totally.
definitely translates into my life today. Growing up in a religious Christian family, was there a time that you can remember that you kind of took the beliefs that we grew up with and made them your own? Maybe they changed, but like, was there a time that you remember like stopping and thinking like, do I believe all this? Our political views that and religious views and like making them like your own, like and accepting that like,
Yeah.
this is actually my opinion.
Right. That is a good question. I do think that I have memories from a young child time, like 7 or 8, where I wanted wanted to adopt what I was being raised to believe was true as truth for myself. But I was like 8. So, the how that actually translated, um, was different as a child. I think that it wasn't until I was faced with some really ugly, um, hurtful, traumatic things within the religious realm as a high schooler that my faith was actually challenged to where I adopted it as my own.
Mhm.
Uh, I think it's probably abnormal that that's how that went for me. Um, my counselor and I talk about how a lot of the things that I went through in life typically result in a different kind of response than what I responded with. My response was, I want nothing to do with this religion, but my relationship with God and my faith in Jesus and my love for Jesus has never been stronger. And that is the foundation that my current faith and life has been built around, and how my faith continues to evolve and change frequently, because I think that that's part of how we're designed, and that I don't think anything should be stagnant. And I'm a huge proponent for having a growth mindset. And within the faith and religion realm, yeah, that took seed, as a child. But a lot of what mom and dad believed and taught us as kids has evolved for them as well, and their perspective and their faith looks different now than it did then, as does mine, as does, I'm sure, every single one of us. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. I was just, yeah. Yeah. It answers it. I feel like for me, I remember, well, really not giving it much thought at all until I was really in my 20s. And probably when I was like challenged on a lot of the things that I believed and
Sure.
didn't have good answers.
Yeah.
And yeah, it wasn't until I started like kind of researching and studying things out of my own due diligence that I felt like it kind of unlocked something in me, like that wanted to reevaluate and rethink everything that I believe,
Right.
to make sure it is what I believe. Because up until that point, I was probably like 23 or 24 when I kind of went through this. And if I hadn't had the time to really research and study and decide on kind of where I stood on a position, I didn't have a belief at all.
Yeah.
And I would be open to anything. Not open to anything, but like not closed-minded
Sure.
about any topic that I hadn't really put time into evaluating.
I think that's a super healthy mindset.
Oh, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
worked hard on it.
I think that's what I mean, though, by not being, I think that is in its own way kind of a growth mindset, being, not being closed-minded and not being just this, this is my stance on literally everything,
yeah.
and I am unmoving, unwavering, and I don't accept your conversation or your challenge or anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, I said anything that I hadn't studied, I was open-minded
Right.
about. I'm actually open-minded about things I have studied as well.
Sure.
I am 100% willing to change my mind on any topic, any aspect at all, if the reasoning for it is compelling enough.
I respect that.
And that's how I have the best conversations with people, is with an open mind. I
Yeah,
truly
100%.
want to understand what your opinions are on things and how you came to those opinions and conclusions. I love that.
And I think it's pretty amazing when you can 100% disagree on a topic and still have respectful conversation around it and not discount that person entirely because of that.
That's where the best conversations come from,
Right.
is from respectfully disagreeing
Yeah,
with people and having discussions about, like, that's how growth happens. Like
exactly.
nobody grows just having an argument about something that you like. When you're all you're thinking about when someone is, telling them you their point of view is like what your rebuttal is, and why it's
Exactly.
wrong, then the conversation is pointless.
Sure.
No party is going to leave with their mind changed about anything, certainly, and
No,
probably with less understanding of the other opposing, point
absolutely.
of view than you started with.
Which is why approaching anything with this is the absolute truth, and if you think differently, you're wrong, is just a really rough way to approach human interaction.
Hmm.
And it's not it's not really going to help anybody grow.
No, I agree. Um, do you feel like your experience growing up is was different than like some of the younger siblings, like their experience growing up? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I knew the
Yes.
answer to that question already, but
I get a little spicy about this
oh
one.
no. Oh, we hit a hot button topic.
Yeah. Was that, I'm sorry, I kind of responded before you finished your question. Was that the full question?
That was the full question.
Okay.
How do you feel like your upbringing was different than some of the younger siblings? And was there any aspect of it that you were jealous of, like the way that they got to be, interacted with,
Yeah,
things they got to do and things?
for sure. So I definitely think that it was very different. I've kind of gone down this conversation a few different times with different siblings and with mom and dad because I find it so interesting. But if you imagine literally anybody raising children for the amount of years that mom and dad raised children for, people, regardless of whether you're raising children, you evolve and you grow and you change over that long of a period of time. I would
Hmm.
hope that you're growing and changing significantly.
Hmm.
Well, they did, just like that's normal. So I always say the parents that the first six of us had versus the parents that the second six of us had were really quite drastically different. And I would even so much as say the first four and then the second four and then the last group of four had pretty drastically different.
Yeah.
So, you're the bottom of
Uh-huh.
the first four.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a very you know, that was mom and dad at their freshest and at their most like um I would say that was before they really had as much of a growth mindset or as much of a like grace-filled approach to really anything.
Hmm.
They put some hard lines out
Hmm.
for things. They had high expectations. There was a no nonsense kind of approach, and they were really probably experimenting with what fit their values within the realm of faith and religion. And and that resulted in us for being exposed to probably a lot of negative and damaging aspects to faith and religion, as well as kind of a less approachable mom and dad. They're more hard lines. And then the second group of four, I think mom and dad were getting a little tired and life had kind of beaten them up a bit. Religion had kind of taken its toll, and they were starting to embrace love, embrace grace, embrace relationship more, be more willing to have those conversations with us that before it was more of a, I said it, we're done, no conversation
Hmm.
necessary. The second group, and we benefited from that growth too, because we were all still at home for that point. But yeah, they were more open, more approachable. And then the last four, yeah, they just got like mom and dad at their lowest energy level. They were so tired and beat up because the rest of us had kind of like kicked their ass.
Oh yeah.
Like, like we had put them through every ringer imaginable as parents. They just raised 8 kids, and so then they have these last 4 that they're like, guys, just be nice. Like just
Just
I don't have it in me to fight with you. And so they literally had no fight left. But I think as being one of the older ones, I'm like, well, what the hell? Like, how come you guys get to just have an enormous amount of freedom. You talk back all the time. You have no respect. Like you you think your life is hard. Like gosh, that one really gets me. Like when the younger four would complain about their life being hard. I'm like, you haven't taken care of your siblings. You haven't had that kind of responsibility. There's so much more responsibility with the older ones that we had to stomach.
I'm sure it came with their own set of difficulties.
How very diplomatic of you.
That perhaps we are not able to see because we were in a different place.
Which is why I would love to hear their perspective.
Well, it also is funny. I mean, it's interesting because, no matter how you or I feel about, the differences and like how stark they seemed.
Sure.
To them, their own perspectives are all that they know. They can't see our perspective. So like whatever level of difficulty they feel like they're at, we probably feel at the same level of difficulty. It's just staggered on a different level line, but we both feel the same.
Yes. And I would say that that's kind of a human trait. I would say that my 9-year-old feels like her life is extremely unfair, and that the expectations I have of her versus my 3-year-old are completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes perfect sense. But yes, mom and dad were different, which meant that the upbringing was different. And society, the world that we lived in was different. Like it was, because of like, the way the world worked when we were kids, we were not kind of told how weird we were all the time, I feel like. And so we didn't have a lot to compare to, and we didn't have a lot of peers telling us that how we were being raised was weird. And the younger ones, I think, did significantly more have more peers who were like, your family is not normal and you should be like me. And so then, public school got introduced, but that's just like a component of it. Mom and dad didn't have it in them to do any more homeschooling, and definitely not if it required a fight. And so.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things, like we grew up before social media was really a thing. Like we had MySpace and Zanga.
Oh yeah.
But that wasn't really an opinion page as much as Facebook is now. And where it's everybody that posts their opinions all day about everything, and a lot of them are pretty strongly worded opinions. So there wasn't as much of that. And I think fortunately for me, like when I was growing up, I don't know about you, but like. Being one of 12 siblings was interesting. Being homeschooling, it was interesting, but it wasn't the weirdest thing about me. The weirdest thing about me was that I was a circus performer.
True.
And that kind of helped people's opinion probably of me right off the bat was like, like, oh, you're a weird homeschooler, but you're a circus performer. That's cool. And that's where the conversation would go, So that maybe that was like way more beneficial than I'm thinking about it right now.
Well, and that makes me think too, the younger group or generation of our siblings, they didn't do any of that with us. Like, I'm trying to remember the time frame of when we did circus performing as a family, but the younger 4 for sure didn't really like get to be a part of our weirdest years. So, and then a lot of us were, gone, moved out by the time the younger 4 were going through like adolescent years. And so there probably wasn't that same unity that we older ones kind of grew up with.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know their perspective on that, but I would imagine the dynamics were different.
Yeah.
And that's possibly why they might not have felt the same support from us that we're not living with them anymore.
Yeah.
And the connection, I think the connection between the younger 4 is actually pretty strong now as adults. And so they probably had their whole own unity that was kind of different than ours.
Yeah, I totally agree. Was there ever a time that you felt like you were kind of a black sheep in the family? I used to joke like it. From my perspective, it always seemed like there was the problem child of the
Uh-huh.
month almost, where I would say
Right.
like we almost needed a newsletter called the black sheep of the month. And I feel like almost all of us had gone through like,
Yes.
so do you remember like any specific time that you felt like you were kind of like an outcast, or maybe it was warranted or not, but, that you were like the black sheep of the family for a period of time?
So, okay, this is kind of a weird answer, but I would say no, because in my own way, I feel like I was the black sheep by being the white sheep all the time. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Okay.
Like,
Oh, I like the siblings almost thought of you as like the black sheep
yes,
because you were the goody two shoes kind of. Oh, I see.
exactly.
I see. I see.
Yes, see,
That's interesting.
following.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always, even as a kid, and then like there hasn't really been a season where I haven't felt like um, I get lumped together with mom and dad.
Mm,
This is partly my own responsibility here, but I always tend to defend them, which is something I'm getting better at. But because of that, I think the sibling group, yeah, has always seen me more as the white sheep, the one that's always like following the rules
yeah.
and being the goody two shoes all the time. And I'm not the one that they go to complain about mom and dad to, because I won't really like although in good fun I'm always up for a good jest, but I have
You
a lot
won't
of respect.
you won't fuel their
Yeah, I'm not going
fire.
to fuel their fire against
Mm,
really anything negative, like against
mm,
other siblings or against mom and dad. So I'm not very much fun in that respect. And I all the times that my siblings have been the black sheep, like I feel like I very actively want to like help them feel like they're part of the group.
hmm hmm
So, yeah, I, I definitely feel singled out, but I don't think it's because I have spent time rebelling or
Sure.
whatever,
It's
like in a
it's almost
traditional
the
way.
opposite, which is so funny, and like I totally get that. I think Cora kind of like went through a bit of a I don't know how she felt about it, but I remember being like when she got a little bit older, was like the goody two shoes a little
Oh,
bit
yeah.
for a while as well,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody kind of like mocked her a little bit for
Yeah.
being like too good, better than thou kind of a thing.
Yes.
Not that we were all degenerates, but
Uh,
we almost wanted everybody to be
uh-huh.
a little bit edgier around here, like so that it felt better, when
Right.
I snuck out, that like surely everybody else is on board with this.
I do think it's kind of interesting how we all as a group do tend like this, maybe this part of this bizarre unity thing, but we can all go against one of us at any given moment
Mm,
with like a pretty like combined uh a combined jest. I mean, like I think we all have like our fallback thing about ourselves that us siblings have kind of identified
mm,
and go after each other for.
mm,
And it's super fun and entertaining to do that. And I think it's kind of a camaraderie thing, but yeah, some of it's a little too close to home that it hurts a little. Like, for instance, I remember one time a group of us were together and we were talking about how everyone's home has a particular smell. Like,
mm-hmm.
everyone, it's like just representative of their home
Yeah.
and it's unique to them. And it kind of like vibes with who they are in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so we were all laughing about this, super interesting. Well, I'm like, well, I want to know, what does my house smell like?
Yeah.
And I remember, I think Lydia and Gloria and a few other sisters were there, and they very mockingly said, love and acceptance and like relationship and like all this. And I was like, oh, that's so funny, except that hurts really bad.
It's so funny to say such nice things in such a distasteful way.
Exactly. Only siblings can do that, though. I
Uh-huh.
feel like, like we've talked about this a little bit, but, we all talk about you and say things like the words themselves, are positive, but when you say it with a sibling context,
Hmm.
it's kind of a dig.
Yeah.
So, you're a bit complacent.
Yes.
You're a bit of a chameleon,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that can serve you really well in life. But probably also is a bit of a trigger point for you to feel like, maybe I don't know. How does that make you feel?
Yeah. No. What bothered me the most was like that I'm actually a pretty self-confident person with my own thoughts and opinions about
Uh-huh.
things. And when people, kind of felt like I was a background and overshadowed, I guess, and like I'm just like overly nice to the point where I let people walk on me. It's
Yeah.
really not the case at all. But I get why that was like, I don't know, something that people thought about me.
Uh-huh.
I can understand that, but yeah, it was a bit annoying when people, especially with my previous marriage, and like that people thought like she must wear the pants in the relationship.
Uh-huh.
Not at all. I'm just a lot, I give off the illusion of being
Sure.
like too meek,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Well, growing up, you, like we kind of covered earlier, you wouldn't battle any of us,
Hmm.
but you also, you didn't share your opinions.
Right.
Like, nobody knew what you thought about anything.
And to this day, I usually don't share my opinions unless someone asks me my opinion,
Yeah.
and then I'm more than happy to like talk about anything,
Right. Well,
anything.
and
It
that's what I think is so key. Like, that's one of those like interesting personality and relationship things that I love so much. And I think Dad is that way too. He's he's probably been misunderstood his whole life.
yeah,
And it's just because people aren't asking him the right questions. Mom, on the other hand, you know how she feels about everything all the time.
mhm,
And even if it changes 5 minutes later, she updates you.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and that's also wonderful, but you always know where she stands on something.
yeah,
And I think that that's really helpful sometimes.
yeah,
Um, but then, yeah, the personality type that you and Dad both have, and maybe there's others in our family that's like that too, that in order to really know what you think about something, you have to directly ask.
hmm,
And it has to be in an environment in which you're comfortable sharing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Do you feel like
agree.
there's others in our family that are like that?
Levi's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Uh, some of the younger ones, like Hope, is a little bit like that. She actually, I mean, she's really just kind of like come into her own where she
Sure.
has her own opinions and things like that. And she has a lot of them. She's actually very interesting to talk to. I don't know if
Yeah,
you sat
she
down and
is.
like had an open conversation with her, but like she's much more opinionated about everything than,
Mm-hmm.
than I was at her age for
Oh, for
sure.
sure.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know about others.
I wonder if Eliza might be kind of like that.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk to Eliza because I
Yeah.
don't know how much like that she is, and I'm sure she has her all kinds of opinions, and I just don't know as much. Whenever she left to go to Alaska, that was just kind of like right at a pivotal time for
Right.
like getting to know her, like because that's when she was
Mm-hmm.
really coming into her own, and then when she came back, it's just yeah, I don't feel like I know her very well, but I'm excited too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, we're running out of time. Last thing, I just like, do you have a specific story from your childhood or upbringing was it fun or hard or anything that you would want to share? Just like a memory that comes to mind.
Oh man, I don't know which direction to take that.
Mm.
Uh, there's a lot. I think one of the most impactful memories I have as a child that I constantly think about now as an adult and raising my own children was a conversation that I had with Dad. And it was mostly just his response. I don't even really remember the conversation afterwards, but I remember saying a statement, and I don't even know what it was, but I said, this is true, right? And his response was, well, Some people believe that to be true. I believe that to be true, but I'd be curious to know what you think. And that's very dad.
Yes.
But that has really that really impacted the way that I parent, and it really impacts the way that honestly that I approach people in general. Not living in this place of hard lines, and a lot of my peers then and now would say that if you make that statement to your parent would say, yes, it's true, or no, it's false. But taking the approach of, that is what I believe, but I'd like to hear what you believe. That kind of blows my mind. And I've taken that to heart when it comes to parenting and just interacting with people.
I love it. Well, Anna, this was been really fun to kind of reminisce about all this stuff growing up. I don't get to talk about this stuff as much, especially with somebody that shares so closely, since we were so close in age.
Yeah, we were really
A
close.
lot of pretty similar experiences. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate the talk.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you.